Hi, I'm Dr. Jeff Nickel. I have Gaston, the little white guy. I have Miss America, the family border collie. And Tony, our other kitty, the gray one, he's having a snack on the floor. He'll be up here soon. Thanks for tuning in. Not everybody wants to adopt a feral dog. But this information and an excellent case I will share with you is there's a lot of information that you can put to use with any dog, in fact cats as well. Because these dogs are so scared, because they never got the social contact with people that they needed when they were youngsters. So they're really handicapped. And in some cases, there are genetic causes as well. And I'll explain a little bit how we can that can be worsened before somebody takes on these kinds of challenges. But these are terrified dogs that can exhibit that with aggression or with hiding and trying to escape. So it can be difficult at home to know what kind of a problem you have, but if your dog that you're trying to adapt, to acclimate to your family or your home is just freaked out like that, there may be a component in there that reaches back to a feral beginning. So, again, I'm glad you're here. In case we haven't met, I'm Dr. Jeff Nickel. I'm a veterinarian and been in general medicine, illnesses, injuries, emergencies, cancer, you name it, for so many years when I did my residency in veterinary behavior medicine. And so I specialize in that now, but I've got the breadth of information that we need to handle a whole lot of problems. Today we're not going to be talking about anything in the body other than a dog's brain. We can talk cat brains if we want to. And if there's a question that you have as we go, by all means, interrupt me. And it doesn't have to do anything, it doesn't have to have anything to do with the subject that we're talking about. But if you like what we're doing and you want to put little hearts or wows or any of that kind of stuff, that's great. So let me start out with this whole case by talking to you about this particular dog named Festus. They're a young married couple, folks in their early 30s, and a young woman, lady's got a heart of gold. She volunteers a significant amount of her time every week at the local shelter. And she's one of these adoption folks who knows that some of these pets are better off in some homes than others. And then there's the occasional one that, frankly, doesn't make a good pet anywhere. These are the heartbreakers. And then you've got these dogs who have never shown that they're going to cause an injury to anybody, but they can be so hard to manage. And these are what they often call special needs pets. And boy, they sure are. And it takes a special kind of a person who has a lot of time and a lot of commitment and an interest in understanding exactly what to do with these kinds of cases to adopt these pets. And so with her training as an adoption counselor at the shelter and with her level of commitment, I didn't have children, so she had what it took. Her work there was part-time, and so she had the energy for this, and she had a lot of the basic skills like kindness and empathy, which go a huge way in handling these pets appropriately and effectively. So here's the story of Festus. He was a male-neutered Weimaraner pit bull mix here in New Mexico, where I practice. There's an enormous number of pit bulls or pit bull crosses, and I think there are in many places, but we sure have them, and we have a lot of mixes. So anyway, these folks, Sue and Jim, adopted this guy Festus when he was 4 years old. Anyway, his problem immediately was that he showed fear of loud noises and quick movements. For example, if one of them tried to put a shirt or a jacket on too quickly, this dog would jump back and panic. If they tried to reach up and turn on the ceiling fan, that motion caused this dog to jump back and retreat. He would get so scared sometimes, and I can't say I know these folks very well. I met them in the exam room a couple of times, but my consultations are 2 hours long, so you get to know people a little bit. But they seem like pretty quiet, down-to-earth folks to me. Yet this dog, their normal activity around the house, in a few cases, freaked him out so badly that while standing, he would lose control and urinate. He wasn't urinating because he needed to go. He just lost control of his bladder sphincter because he was so terrified just by normal day-to-day activities. So we had a real severe problem with this little guy. And so in the exam room, I watched, and as I gathered detail from them in history, I was observant of this dog. In fact, I start out by observing them when they're waiting, which I pretty much stay on time. And they were seated in the reception room, and when I went out, I observed him a little bit. And he was scanning. He was looking here and there, hoping that he wouldn't find that next perceived threat, but ready for it to jump back and try to escape or defend himself if he felt the need. And again, so many of these feral dogs have defensive aggression that is their presenting symptom. Now this dog would react aggressively, having a little snack, Gaston, but he never hurt anybody. He never really got never even caused anybody any discomfort. But these folks, Sue and Jim, what they found was that when Festus would try to, if he couldn't get away from them because he was inside and they could not create distance and take off, he would try to create distance between him and them when they were scaring him inadvertently by lunging and snapping. And in several cases, he actually got his teeth on them, but only mouthed. And it wasn't even something that terrified him quickly. So poor Festus, here he is in the exam room, and he's kind of scanning around even in the room. He was hiding in the corner, staying very close to his male person because he just had a special bond with him. But I just could tell by just observing this dog how miserable he was so much of the time. And even if we were never successful in improving his ability to function with people, we were really trying very hard to get him to just feel better and enjoy some peacefulness. And because that's why these folks took him in the first place, because Sue in particular didn't feel that he was going to get adopted by anybody, and she didn't want to put down. So she took him in. So, they already had a history of, their friends coming over to visit, and he was exceptionally terrified when these people came by. And he routinely lost control of his bladder when people walked in. And I often sort of half in jest explain to many of my clients, the pet parents I see with these really scared dogs, is that, not that this makes any sense, but if we were to do the best thing behaviorally for so many of these frightened dogs, we would sell our houses and move off the grid and find a cave to live in, and no fences anywhere in sight, and just nothing but open spaces, so that our dogs could come and go and make the same kinds of choices that they would make if they were feral dogs living in the wild, if they were, we were their leaders and part of their canine social group, but if something scared them, including other dogs or anything else, they had all the choices that they naturally are genetically programmed that they should have to create all the distance that they need to. But when they're in our houses or they're in our yards, they're limited, of course, by the walls of the building that we live in, and they don't understand that stuff. But if you have a well-adjusted dog, like Miss America, our border collie here, we're very lucky to have her, she adapts like, truthfully, the great majority of dogs do. And they move into a house and they go, gee, walls? How the heck am I supposed to get out of here if I need to? Well, I guess I'll just adapt. And what's with this wire fence? I can see everybody else, but I can't get to anybody to chase them off. I guess I'll just bark. And they do the best they can. But if you've got a really scared dog who's struggling with severe anxiety, then those contrivances that we foist on them without even thinking about it, that can be a big, big problem. So here's Festus, who, if he couldn't retreat, he would lunge and try to drive off the scary monster. And the tendency for many people, and it's understandable, although it's not the right thing to do, but there are people who will want to punish dogs like that, or severely reprimand them, or use a squirt gun or something else to hose these dogs to try to punish the behavior so that the dog will stop doing what they don't want the dog to do. But you have to understand that even when punishment is used by the book, there's never anything about it that tells the dog or cat or child or spouse or anybody else what you want them doing instead of the behavior that you punished. you've got to make it clear that there's a reinforcer in it for the dog to do what you want. And, oh, Paula, thank you. Fireworks finally ended, and we had a huge thunderstorm, so thanks. My dogs and cats feel better. I'm delighted, Paula, and I hope you were able to make use of the Cilio, because I'll tell you, we were, let me digress for a minute. Our family went up to Pagosa Springs, Colorado, just north of the state line with New Mexico for the 4th of July weekend. And we had our dog, Miss America, here, and our adult sons had their significant others, and they brought their dogs. We had 4 dogs, all about 35, 40 pounds. And the other 3 had no problem at all with the fireworks, but boy, they were very close. But Miss America here, she really has a phobia of those sudden bangs and other loud noises. And we gave her the Cilio, and after about 25 minutes, it had taken the edge off, but she was still a trembling little nervous girl, so I gave her a second dose, and that quieted her down. So, boy, it can make a difference. So, anyway, let me talk to you about Festus. So here's this little guy. He came so I talked with Sue and Jim, his people, what they had done so far to try to help Festus. And they'd done some really smart things. For example, what they'd done so far was they never hovered or stood near him. Smart. And they would sit when they were near him. And that's really valuable, because when a person is sitting either in a chair or even better on the floor, the perception to the dog is that the person is smaller and a less of a perceived threat. Again, these folks were the last people to do anything intentionally to scare this dog. It wasn't about them. It's about this poor freaked out dog. And so they found that if they appeared smaller, they didn't approach him, that he would do better. And avoidance of fear triggers is essentially important. We know from modern brain imaging, like fMRIs and PET scans, that when fear is triggered repeatedly, the neural circuits in the brain that carry those messages and the long-term memory storage actually not only gets stronger, but is measurably thicker. These brain imaging methods can nowadays measure the thickness of these neural circuits and the number of excitatory and inhibitory neural inputs that sharpen and speed the response. So if you see a professional athlete or a dancer or a singer or somebody who's got, God-given talent and has had the greatest of coaching since childhood and has practiced these skills thousands or tens of thousands of times, and they're Olympic level at it, it's practice, practice, practice. And bad responses, things we don't want, a dog or anybody else can get faster and better skilled at something that we don't want. And so, in part because dogs regard any response from a leader as a reinforcer, we don't respond to behaviors we don't want. We don't tell them what we don't want them to do, because they can misinterpret that. And when you reprimand with a sharp tone, of course, all you do is raise the dog's agitation. So ignore these behaviors, especially when they're fear-related, whether it's attempts to escape or it's attempts to lunge and snap and growl. These are potentially dangerous, but we actually are going backwards if we reprimand that kind of stuff or punish it in any way at all. So I explained to these folks that what I wanted them to do, beyond ignoring, was I wanted them to desensitize him to being close to people. And he was such a severe case that I started him on an anti-anxiety medication. In this particular case, I chose gabapentin, Gababentin. Gabapentin, I have mentioned it before, it's very, very safe, and it not only reduces anxiety, but also the explosive nature of some of these responses. And we've got a lot of dosing flexibility with it, so a doctor who understands gabapentin can put it to good use in a case like this. And it starts acting pretty darn quickly, and we found that it not only helped this dog relax without any sedation at all, but Festus was a lot happier pretty quickly, and he was capable of learning because his prefrontal cortex, the thinking, decision-making part of the brain, that new learned information has to go through before it goes to long-term memory storage, it was not overwhelmed with excitatory neurotransmitters like adrenaline, and it could actually function. And Linda, hey, wonderful! I'm delighted. Thank you for tuning in. So anyway, I had them start desensitization. 2 people, and I had them both sitting on the floor and prepare Festus. Oh, you know that I have a treat bag, don't you, Miss America? That's right, girlfriend. So, yeah, you have to earn it, you know, just like Festus. So one person would be sitting, holding a treat out for Festus, okay? And something thick. This is a particular type of a treat. It's called, what do they call these? Canine carryouts. They're kind of soft, moist, and rubbery when you get them, but if you let them dry, they get kind of tough. And so if a dog starts to chew on it, you can hold on to it. And they enjoy actually pulling on it and trying to get it loose from your hand. Jerky works well also. And so if you hold this out like this, the dog can work on it and pull on it while the other person scoots just a tiny bit closer to him. Now, Festus was set up by one of his people holding the treat way the heck out and not looking directly at him, just holding it way the heck out there. And he would come for that treat because they had not fed him that day. He was a little bit hungry. He was food motivated. And he would approach for that treat, and one of his people would hold that treat, and he would sort of pull on it while the other person scooted just a little bit closer. Not to his face, but to his shoulder, and the side of the person to the scared dog's shoulder. This is based on canine body signaling that we've studied in groups of free-living dogs. This is one of the many, many ways they communicate with each other. And the side to side, or shoulder to shoulder, if you will, is an indicator that I am not a threat. Okay? So if the other person scooted a little closer to him than he was willing to accept, and he started to back away and retreat, well, the food lure was taken away because he wasn't earning it. He would be allowed to earn it when he showed a little bit of courage and allowed the other person to get a little closer. So the treat was taken away, and the person who scooted a little too close to him would scoot a little further back, and then another treat was brought out. Treat bags make things like this handy, and it was held out like that, and I'll let Miss America enjoy it here a little bit because she's such a willing participant. And so he would pull on it like this at a distance, and his person would scoot not quite as close as the last time. And so then he would be allowed to have the food reward. Yes, you can have that piece. There you go, honey. And he would be allowed to have that. Now, you can do this several times, but only for about 3 to 4 minutes. And only 2 of those brief sessions daily. My goodness gracious. I'm going to put this away. We'll use it again in a minute, you cute girl. That's a hard thing for people to limit themselves to. 3 or 4 minutes. When you get to about that point, the dog is very often going, hey, I can learn this. I'm liking these lessons. And you want to keep going. But if you continue going, when you quit is when the dog goes, oh, geez, I'm so bored, I've had it with this. And then the next time you bring out this structure for teaching, they go, oh, gosh, it wasn't that much fun. So you quit when the dog is really enthusiastic, but also for reasons of being able to store in the short-term memory that kind of lesson. Research has shown that 3 to 4 minutes just twice a day, and they learn much faster than if you overdo it. And anything more than that is overdoing it. So these folks were able to repeat this twice a day to the extent where Festus would actually let these people, one person sitting right next to his shoulder, and then the other person was starting to come closer, and before long, here they were sitting with their dog. But before they stood up each time, knowing that standing up right next to a fearful dog would trigger more fear. So they sort of crab walked and scooted further away from him and then stood up and turned and pivoted so they were facing the other way to avoid triggering another ramp up in his fear. Because, some of that, it's not a perfect world, that kind of thing is going to happen, but we try very hard to help the dog abandon those old associations because they don't do anybody any good, and all they do is rehearse the behavior. So he did very, very well, and when I saw him on follow-up, he was actually able to be near them, and he was starting to explore the home, a totally natural behavior. And when they came back about 6 weeks later for a 1-hour follow-up consultation, he was exploring the exam room, sniffing and checking things out. That's what dogs are supposed to do. And he had been so freaked out He couldn't even function like a real dog. And I got another question here. Oh, Michael Sanfilippo. Well, thank you. And yes, I'm looking forward to the AVMA meeting in D.C., and I'm looking forward. Michael is one of the excellent people who works with our National Veterinary Association, is the American Veterinary Medical Association, AVMA, as opposed to our compadres on the human side, the AMA. And immediately prior to the AVMA, which is in Washington, D.C. this year, will be our International Veterinary Behavior Meeting. And that's a 3-day meeting prior to the 4-day AVMA meeting. So I'll be gone for a long time. But boy, when I come back, my head's going to be so big because I'll be stuffing things in there. First, it'll go into my short-term memory, by the way, and then I will read my notes and study it and try to stuff it into my long-term memory and then keep those notes for reference because there's so much information. That's the only way I've ever learned to manage it. But fortunately, I won't be scared to death when I'm sitting in those lecture halls. I'll be drinking coffee, so I'll stay awake. So anyway, these are lessons for the feral dog situation. And the thing that made Sue and Jim as successful as they were with Festus was their kindness. They had to be kind and empathic people to start with, or they would never have adopted this dog. But I'd like to also make a final point, and that is that even if you're just as committed as these folks are to doing good things for pets who wouldn't have a decent home any other way, better pick your cases very carefully because they get bonded. They're such social creatures, dogs are, that they connect strongly even if they're scared to death. And if they get moved out of a home where they don't work out, their level of anxiety-related behaviors ratchets up to a new level in their next attempt to adapt to the next home, which means that every time a dog is rehomed through the system, they're less and less likely to succeed. You know, going back to the beginning, these feral dogs, part of the problem is that when they were amenable or their brain was capable of accepting exposure to other species, like humans, between the ages of 5 and 12 weeks, and that is the developmental change in the immature brain, the developmental period, when they can become accustomed to cats, other dogs, people, all that. So essential to have that gentle exposure to as many different kinds of people, men, women, boys, girls, babies, people of different races, so that through adulthood they go, I'm not worried about this individual. I've seen them all before. And they've always been gentle experiences. And that window of time between 5 and 12 weeks, critically important. You don't really socialize a dog after that. One of the other handicaps that Festus is likely to have had going into this thing was that we now know from research that the exposures that occurred to a mother dog between 3 weeks prior to the delivery of her litter, at the time that she gives birth to those puppies, and for an additional 3 weeks after, whatever occurs to her occurs to the puppies. And those occurrences, those exposures, are permanent. They are just as strong, if not stronger, than genetic predispositions. And frankly, there isn't any turning back on many of those. And so explaining that to these folks with Festus, Jim and Sue, I had to make it clear that there were likely improvements that they could make with that scared guy with respect to his trust of them. But they would always need to be careful so that not to frighten him because it could always happen easily, and he would probably never become relaxed with people he didn't know. And so just to avoid the stab of fear and panic for this poor dog, and again, a rehearsal of these ramp-ups in arousal, I made it clear that the smartest way for him to avoid those triggers was, if they anticipated guests, to put him in another room before the arrival of their friends, give him a loaded food toy to work on in there so he could do something that was natural for his species, and that's to forage and extract food, and then let him back out when they were gone, because he would always be a special case. So, but you know, we all are in some way or another, aren't we? I know I am. So thank you so much for tuning in. And you're welcome to share this with your friends. Just send them to my Facebook page, facebook.com/Dr. Jeff Nicol, NICHOL.com. And if you go to my website, by the way, you can subscribe. And the website is drjeffnicol.com. And there's no charge to subscribe, and if you do, I will send you my free at-home pet first aid and CPR guide for cats and dogs. And every Tuesday morning, you will get my weekly video, it's usually Facebook Live, and my weekly media column that I put in the Albuquerque Journal from the week previous. I usually answer questions, although the column that you'll get this Tuesday if you sign up has to do with grain-free diets in dogs. It's become pretty popular, and it turns out there's a big downside, potentially, and can be pretty serious, in fact. So go to my website and sign up, and you'll get the column and the Facebook Live on Tuesday, and you'll get it every Tuesday. So thank you again for tuning in. I'm Dr. Jeff Nickel. Here's Miss America, the excellent Border Collie. Tony and Gaston now is snacking on the floor, doing what cats must do, I guess.